Captain Lee Soo-jin stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the stars through the main viewing window. The Harmony's Edge moved slowly through space, its engines humming softly. This was her favorite time of day during space travel. The crew was quiet, the ship was peaceful, and the universe seemed endless and beautiful. She had been captain of this exploration vessel for 8 years now. In all that time, she had never fired a weapon in anger. She had never seen a battle. The idea of war seemed as distant and impossible as the ancient stories her grandmother used to tell about dragons and magic. "Captain," called Navigator Park Woo-bin from his station, "we are approaching the Kepler 442 system. Should we begin our scan of the third planet?" "Yes, begin the scan," Lee replied. "Take us in slowly. I want a full scientific survey of that world." The year was 5024, and humanity had spread across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. 847 star systems now held human colonies. Some were massive worlds with billions of people. Others were small research stations with only a few hundred scientists. All of them lived in peace. Chief Engineer Choi Hai-rim looked up from her console. "Captain, the new fusion core is working perfectly. We could run for another 50 years without stopping for fuel." "Good to hear," Lee said with a smile, "though I hope we will dock at a station before then. I miss real food." Dr. Yoon Ji-ho, the ship's medical officer, laughed from his station. "The food processors make perfectly good meals, Captain. Your taste buds are just being difficult." This was normal conversation on a human ship. Light jokes, friendly talk, and the comfortable feeling of people who worked well together. War was something from the history books. Violence was what their ancestors had done thousands of years ago, back when humans were young and foolish. The Great Accord had been signed 3,147 years ago. 12 different species had agreed to never fight large wars again. They would solve problems with words, not weapons. They would explore space together, share knowledge, and build a better galaxy for everyone. Humans had become famous throughout the galaxy as peacemakers. When the Zephyrians and the Altarians had disagreed about mining rights, humans had helped them find a fair solution. When the Vegan traders had problems with the Rigel merchants, human diplomats had worked for months to create new trade agreements that made everyone happy. "Captain," Park called out again, "I'm getting some strange readings from the Outer Rim colonies." Lee walked over to his station. "What kind of strange readings?" 3 colonies have stopped sending their daily reports. Haven Colony, New Busan, and Frontier Station 7. They all went quiet at different times over the past week. "Equipment problems," suggested Choi from her engineering station. "Maybe," Park said, but he sounded worried. "But all 3 at once? That seems unlikely." Lee felt a small cold feeling in her stomach. In 3,000 years of peace, colonies did not just go quiet. There were backup systems, emergency protocols, and hundreds of ways to call for help. Even if their main communication array broke down, they should still be able to send some kind of signal. "Set course for Haven Colony," she ordered. "Best speed." "Captain," Dr. Yoon said quietly, "Haven Colony has 12 million people. If something happened there—" "Nothing happened there," Lee said firmly. "Their equipment broke down. Maybe there was a solar storm that damaged their systems. We will go help them fix whatever is wrong." But even as she said the words, Lee did not believe them. She had been in space long enough to know when something was truly wrong. The feeling in her stomach was getting worse. The Harmony's Edge changed course and began moving toward Haven Colony. The ship moved through space at faster than light speed, but it would still take 2 days to reach the colony. 2 days of waiting and worrying. On the first day, they tried to contact the other colonies in that sector. No response. The communication network showed that signals were being sent to the colonies, but nothing was coming back. It was as if the colonies had simply vanished from the galaxy. On the second day, Dr. Yoon found Lee staring out at the stars in the ship's observation lounge. "You cannot sleep either?" he asked. "No," Lee admitted. "Something is very wrong, Ji-ho. I can feel it." "Maybe we should call for backup," he suggested. "Admiral Song has patrol ships in that sector." "And tell him what?" "That 3 colonies are not answering their messages." "He will think we are being foolish." Dr. Yoon sat down beside her. "Soo-jin, you have good instincts. If you think something is wrong, then something is probably wrong." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Both of them had been born in the age of peace. Neither had ever seen real violence or destruction. The worst thing that had ever happened in their lifetimes was when a meteor had hit New Sol's moon, and even that had only damaged some research equipment. "Do you remember the history lessons from school?" Dr. Yoon asked suddenly. "Which ones?" "About the old wars. About what humans used to be like before the Great Accord." Lee nodded slowly. "Ancient history. We were violent and aggressive back then, but we grew up. We learned to be better." "Sometimes I wonder," Dr. Yoon said quietly, "what would happen if we faced a real threat again? Would we remember how to fight?" "We will never need to find out," Lee replied. "Those days are over forever." The next morning they arrived at Haven Colony. Lee stood on the bridge staring at the main screen in shock. Where Haven Colony should have been, where 12 million people had lived and worked and raised their families, there was something impossible. The planet was still there, but the surface had been changed into perfect geometric patterns. Huge hexagonal shapes covered the land like a giant honeycomb. The cities were gone. The farms were gone. The spaceports and the houses and the schools and the hospitals were all gone. "Life signs?" Lee asked in a whisper. Park checked his instruments with shaking hands. "None, Captain. No life signs anywhere on the planet." "What could do this?" Choi asked, her voice full of horror. Lee did not answer. She could not answer. In 3,000 years of peace, nothing like this had ever happened. The galaxy had no weapons that could reshape an entire planet. No species had ever shown this kind of power or cruelty. "Take us down to the surface," she ordered. "We need to investigate." "Captain," Dr. Yoon said softly, "maybe we should call for help first." "No," Lee said, her voice becoming harder. "We are here now. We will find out what happened to these people." As the Harmony's edge descended toward the transformed world below, none of them knew that they were about to discover something that would change humanity forever. The long peace was about to end, and Captain Lee Soo-jin was about to learn what her species was truly capable of when pushed beyond all limits. The age of war was about to begin again. The shuttle landed on what used to be Haven Colony's main plaza. Captain Lee Soo-jin stepped out first, followed by Dr. Yoon Ji-ho and Security Officer Nam Gi-soo. The air was breathable, but it smelled wrong. It smelled like metal and something else they could not identify. Everything around them was wrong. The ground beneath their feet was perfectly smooth and formed into hexagonal shapes. Each hexagon was exactly the same size. The pattern stretched as far as they could see in every direction. "Where are all the buildings?" Nam asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Gone," Dr. Yoon said, scanning the area with his medical equipment. "But there are no ruins. No broken pieces, nothing. It is like someone took everything apart piece by piece." Lee knelt down and touched the strange surface. It was warm and had a slight vibration, as if something was moving deep underneath. "This is not natural. Someone did this on purpose." They walked for an hour through the geometric landscape. 12 million people had lived here. There had been schools and hospitals and shopping centers. There had been parks where children played and restaurants where families ate dinner. Now there was only the endless pattern of hexagons. "Captain," Dr. Yoon called out from ahead, "you need to see this." He was standing in front of the only structure they had found. It was tall and thin, made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from within. Strange symbols were carved into its surface from bottom to top. "Have you ever seen writing like this?" Lee asked. "Never," Dr. Yoon replied. "This is not from any species in the galactic database." Nam was checking his weapons even though he had never used them in real combat. "Captain, we should leave. This place feels dangerous." Lee studied the crystal structure. "Take pictures of everything. We need to get these symbols back to the linguistics experts." As they worked, none of them noticed the small devices hidden in the geometric patterns around them. Tiny sensors watched their every move and recorded everything they said. Far away, in a place beyond human knowledge, other minds were learning about humanity for the first time. 2 days later, they were back on the Harmony's edge, racing toward Federation headquarters. Admiral Song Hyunwoo was waiting for them when they arrived at the orbital station above New Seoul. "Show me everything," the Admiral said without any greeting. Lee played the recordings from Haven Colony. Admiral Song watched in silence, his face becoming harder with each image. When the recording ended, he was quiet for a long time. "Have you checked the other colonies?" he finally asked. "New Busan and Frontier Station 7 show the same pattern," Lee reported. We could not land because of radiation storms, but the orbital scans show the same hexagonal formations. 3 colonies. 15 million people. Admiral Song stood up and walked to the window. In 3,000 years of peace, we have never lost even one colony. Security Chief Kang Mina entered the room carrying a data tablet. Admiral, I have the translation of the symbols. Everyone turned to look at her. She looked pale and frightened. Dr. Lim Tae-sung worked on them all night, she continued. The language is completely unknown, but he found patterns. Mathematical relationships. He thinks he has a basic translation. What does it say? Lee asked. Kang looked down at her tablet. The harvest begins. The soft ones will feed the eternal machine. Resistance will only delay the inevitable. The room fell silent. Outside the window, ships moved peacefully through space. People went about their normal lives, not knowing that everything had changed. This is a declaration of war, Admiral Song said quietly. But war against whom? Dr. Yoon asked. We do not know who they are or where they came from. And why? Lee added. What do they want? What is this harvest they are talking about? Kang activated a holographic display. Dr. Lim thinks the word we translated as harvest might mean something different. Something more like processing or conversion. You mean they are not trying to conquer us? Admiral Song said slowly. They are trying to use us, like raw materials. The idea was so horrible that nobody spoke for several minutes. In all of human history, even during the ancient wars, enemies had fought for land or resources or power. Nobody had ever tried to process an entire species like materials in a factory. We need to warn the other colonies, Lee said. If they are continuing their harvest. Already done, Admiral Song replied. I sent out emergency alerts to every human world. But Sujin, our military is not designed for this kind of threat. It was true. Humanity's Space Force was built for peacekeeping and exploration. They had weapons, but only for dealing with pirates or dangerous wildlife. They had never faced an enemy that could reshape entire planets. What about the other species? Dr. Yoon asked. The Altarians have a strong fleet. The Zephyrians have powerful weapons. Kang shook her head. I contacted all the major species. They are horrified, but their military forces are as small as ours. The Great Accord worked too well. Nobody is prepared for real war. Admiral Song walked back to his desk and sat down heavily. For 3,000 years, we have been the galaxy's peacemakers. We helped everyone solve their problems without fighting. Now we face an enemy that does not want to negotiate. So what do? Lee asked. We learn who they are and what they want, the Admiral replied, and we figure out how to stop them. Over the next week, more colonies went silent. The pattern was always the same. First, all communication stopped. Then, when rescue ships arrived, they found the same hexagonal landscape and the same crystal monuments with the same terrible message. The enemy was systematic and efficient. They took exactly what they wanted and left behind their geometric signature. But they never showed themselves. No one had seen their ships or their weapons or even what they looked like. They are like ghosts, Lee said during one of the daily briefings. They appear, they destroy everything, and then they vanish. Not ghosts, corrected Dr. Kim Hae-won, the Federation's lead scientist. Something much worse. Something that sees us as nothing more than resources to be collected. Admiral Song stood up from his chair. Then we need to show them that we are more than just resources. We need to show them what humanity is really capable of when threatened. But none of them knew what humanity was truly capable of. The long peace had lasted so long that they had forgotten their own history. They had forgotten what their species had once been before they learned to be civilized. They were about to remember. In the depths of space, the enemy continued their harvest. They had processed countless species across the galaxy over millions of years. Each time the pattern was the same. The soft organic beings would panic and flee, or they would try to hide, or they would send messages begging for mercy. None had ever fought back effectively. The entities that humans would soon call the Reapers had never encountered a species like humanity. They had never met a race that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war before learning to live in peace. They were about to learn the difference between a species that had never known violence and a species that had chosen to put violence aside. The harvest was about to become a war. Chancellor Kim Dae-ho stood before the emergency session of the Federation Council. Representatives from all 847 human colonies filled the Great Hall. Many had traveled for days to attend this meeting. Their faces showed fear, anger, and confusion. In 2 weeks, we have lost 12 colonies, the Chancellor began. 43 million people have vanished. The entity responsible has left us a message. They see us as materials to be harvested. Angry voices rose from the assembly. Representative Oh Min-jun from the Tau Ceti colonies stood up. What is our military doing? Where are our defenses? General Bae Soon-young stepped forward. Her uniform was crisp and her posture straight, but her face showed the strain of the past weeks. Our current military consists of 300 patrol ships and 50,000 peacekeeping personnel spread across 847 systems. We are designed to stop pirates and settle disputes between colonies. That is not enough, shouted Representative Hwang Soo-jin from the frontier worlds. We need real weapons, real warships. We signed the Great Accord, reminded Representative Park Do-hyun from New Seoul. We agreed to limit our military forces. All species did. The Great Accord did not prepare us for this, General Bae replied grimly. Our enemy is not bound by any treaty. They do not negotiate. They simply take what they want. Chancellor Kim raised his hand for silence. Dr. No Yoon-seo from the Historical Archives has discovered something important. Doctor? Dr. No was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent the last week searching through the deepest files in the government's classified databases. What she found there had kept her awake for nights. 3,000 years ago, when humanity signed the Great Accord, we made certain preparations, she began. Our leaders understood that someday we might face a threat that could not be resolved peacefully. She activated a holographic display that showed star maps and technical diagrams. They created something called the Prometheus Protocols, hidden systems designed to restore our military capability if humanity ever faced extinction. The hall fell silent. Even General Bae looked surprised. What kind of systems? Asked Representative O. Automated factories hidden throughout human space. Weapon designs stored in quantum vaults. Strategic databases containing every military lesson learned during our violent past. All of it was sealed away when the long peace began. Chancellor Kim studied the display. Why was this never revealed before? Because our ancestors hoped we would never need it, Dr. No replied. They wanted future generations to live in peace. But they also wanted us to survive if that peace was broken. General Bae stepped closer to the display. How extensive are these preparations? Dr. No touched the hologram and new images appeared. Manufacturing plants hidden inside asteroids, orbital weapons platforms disguised as research stations, ship designs that could turn merchant vessels into warships within days. Extensive, she said simply. Our peaceful ancestors were descendants of the most successful warriors in galactic history. They did not forget how to fight. They just chose to stop fighting. Can we activate these systems? The Chancellor asked. Yes, but doing so will change us forever. The Prometheus protocols are not just about weapons. They are about transforming our entire civilization back into something we have not been for 3,000 years. Representative Hwang stood up again. Change us how? Dr. No looked around the room at the peaceful politicians and diplomats. Into what we were before the Great Accord. Into what we need to be to survive this threat. Captain Lee Soo-jin watched the proceedings from the observer's gallery. She had been recalled from her patrol to serve as a military advisor. The past weeks had changed her. The peaceful explorer who had once joked with her crew was becoming something harder. If we activate these protocols, she called out, what happens to the other species? They trusted us to remain peaceful. The other species are not facing extinction, General Bae replied. They offered to help, but their combined fleets could not protect a single human colony from this threat. It was true. The Altarians had sent their finest ships, but they carried scientific instruments, not weapons. The Zephyrians had offered their warrior caste, but they numbered only in the thousands. Every other species in the galaxy had grown comfortable and soft during the long peace. Only humanity had prepared for the return of war. Chancellor Kim looked around the Great Hall. All in favor of activating the Prometheus protocols? The vote was unanimous. Within hours, signals went out to every human world. Ancient codes were transmitted to hidden receivers. Systems that had slept for 3 millennia began to wake up. On the industrial world of New Kyoto, massive doors opened in the planet's crust. Manufacturing complexes the size of cities rose from underground chambers. Automated systems began converting civilian factories into weapons production lines. In the asteroid belt around Kepler 438, Research stations suddenly revealed their true nature. Weapons platforms unfolded like deadly flowers. Missile launchers and energy cannons that had been disguised as communication arrays came online. Captain Lee received new orders. The Harmony's Edge was to report to the Titan shipyards for immediate military conversion. Her exploration vessel would become a warship. "How long will the conversion take?" she asked the shipyard commander. 6 days, replied Admiral Ryu Dongmin, the newly appointed head of the military conversion program. "Your ship has good bones. We will add armor, weapons, and military-grade sensors. What about my crew? They will train on the new systems during the conversion." "Captain, I have read your file. You have good instincts and your crew trusts you. That makes you valuable." Lee looked out at the shipyard where hundreds of civilian vessels were being transformed. Merchant ships were gaining missile launchers. Research vessels were being fitted with energy cannons. Transport ships were becoming troop carriers. "Admiral, what if this does not work? What if our enemy is too powerful?" Admiral Ryu was quiet for a moment. "Then humanity will die fighting instead of being harvested like crops." "But Sujin, I do not think we will lose." "Why not?" "Because our enemy made a mistake. They assumed we were like all the other species they have harvested. Peaceful creatures who had never known real conflict." The Admiral pointed to the activity around them. Ships being converted, weapons being manufactured, soldiers being trained. "They do not understand what they have awakened. For 3,000 years we have been the galaxy's diplomats and peacekeepers. But before that we were something else entirely. What were we? We were the species that conquered death itself. We were the race that turned every challenge into an opportunity. We were the beings that looked at an empty galaxy and decided to fill it with human life." As if to prove his point, reports began coming in from across human space. The hidden factories were already producing weapons. The disguised military stations were coming online. Most importantly, humans everywhere were volunteering for military service. In 3,000 years of peace, no human had ever seen real war. But the genetic memory was still there. The cultural knowledge had been preserved. When faced with extinction, humanity was remembering what it meant to be human. Dr. Yang Seok-jin led a team of scientists studying the debris from the harvested colonies. "I think I understand how they do it," he announced during a briefing. "Their technology breaks down matter at the molecular level and reassembles it into these geometric patterns." "But why?" asked General Bay. "I believe they are building something. Each harvested world becomes part of a larger structure. They are not just killing us. They are using us to construct something enormous." Admiral Song studied the data. "A weapon, maybe, or a ship, or something we cannot even imagine. But whatever it is, they need organic matter to build it. And they have been doing this for a very long time." The implications were terrifying. If the enemy had been harvesting species across the galaxy for millions of years, they might have resources beyond human comprehension. But humanity was no longer the same species that had first encountered the geometric patterns on Haven Colony. The Prometheus protocols had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3 millennia. The long peace was over. The age of war had begun again, and this time humanity was ready. Fleet Admiral Ryu Dongmin stood in the command center of the New Seoul military complex. Around him, dozens of screens showed the transformation happening across human space. The Prometheus protocols had been active for only 3 weeks, but the changes were already incredible. "Status report," he ordered. Commander Shin A-cha stepped forward with her datapad. 237 civilian ships have been converted to military standards. The hidden weapon factories are now producing at full capacity. We estimate we will have a combat-ready fleet within 6 weeks. What about personnel? 12 million humans have volunteered for military service. The training programs are operating around the clock. Admiral Ryu nodded grimly. 12 million volunteers in 3 weeks. In the peaceful galaxy, that number would have been shocking. Now it seemed like humanity's natural response to an existential threat. "Any word from our deep space scouts?" Captain Lee's task force has been tracking the enemy movement patterns. They believe the next target will be either the Vega colonies or the mining worlds in the Centauri sector. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Lee Soo-jin's face appeared on the main communication screen. Her ship was now the HFS Retribution, armed with weapons that had not existed 3 weeks ago. "Admiral," she reported, "we have found something you need to see." The screen changed to show a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red dots marked the locations where colonies had been harvested. But now there were other markers. orange dots moving between star systems. "These are enemy ships?" Admiral Ryu asked. "We think so," Lee replied. "They appear on our sensors for only a few minutes before vanishing again. But we have tracked their movement patterns." The map showed the orange dots moving in straight lines between the red harvest sites. They were not random. The enemy was following a specific plan. "Dr. Yang's team has analyzed the pattern," Lee continued. "They believe the enemy is building some kind of network. Each harvested world becomes a node in a larger structure." Admiral Ryu studied the display. "A network for what purpose? Unknown. But whatever they are building, it is enormous. The harvested colonies are just the beginning. The implications were terrifying. But Admiral Ryu felt something he had not experienced in decades. Excitement. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity had actionable intelligence about their enemy. "Captain, maintain your surveillance but do not engage. We are not ready for direct confrontation yet." "Understood, Admiral. But sir, when we are ready, my crew wants to be in the first attack." Admiral Ryu smiled grimly. "I would expect nothing less." After ending the communication, Admiral Ryu turned to his staff officers. "How are our other preparations progressing?" Chief of Staff Colonel Park Si-hoon activated another display. "The Titan yards have begun construction of our first true warships. The designs come from the Prometheus archives. Ships our ancestors planned but never built. The images showed massive vessels unlike anything in the modern galaxy. They were built for one purpose: war. Heavy armor, powerful weapons, and advanced tactical systems. How long until the first ships are ready? 8 weeks for the smaller vessels. 6 months for the battleships. Too long." Admiral Ryu decided. "The enemy will not wait for us to build our ideal fleet. We need to fight with what we have. Sir, the converted civilian ships are not designed for major combat operations. Then we will use them differently. Speed, surprise, and superior tactics. Our ancestors conquered half the galaxy with less advanced ships." Meanwhile, in a secure laboratory complex on New Seoul, Dr. Han Ye-jin was making breakthrough discoveries about enemy technology. She had been studying the crystal monuments left at each harvest site. "The crystals are not just monuments," she announced to her research team. "They are communication devices." "Active ones? You mean they are still transmitting?" asked Dr. Lim Tae-sung, the linguist who had first translated the harvest message. "Constantly. They are sending data back to the enemy. Information about our response, our technology, our capabilities. Can we block the transmissions?" Dr. Han smiled for the first time in weeks. "Better. We can feed them false information." She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of one of the crystals. "I have figured out how to alter their transmissions. We can make the enemy think we are still helpless." This was exactly what Admiral Ryu needed to hear when Dr. Han reported her findings. "You can make them underestimate us?" "Yes, but only for a short time. Once we attack, they will know the truth." "How short?" "Maybe 1 battle. 2 if we are lucky." "1 battle might be enough," Admiral Ryu replied, "if we can catch them completely off guard." The plan that emerged was ambitious and dangerous. Humanity would continue to appear weak and defenseless while secretly preparing for a massive surprise attack. When the enemy came to harvest their next target, they would find themselves facing the reborn human war machine. 3 weeks later, enemy ships appeared in the Kepler 452 system. The colony world there had 8 million people and was known for its agricultural production. It should have been an easy harvest. Captain Lee watched from her hiding place behind the system's outer moon. The Retribution was powered down to minimal levels, appearing like just another piece of space debris. Around her, 30 other converted warships waited in similar concealment. "Enemy vessels confirmed," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ko Jinsu. 12 ships, unknown configuration. They are approaching the colony world. The enemy ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were geometric and crystalline, like the monuments they left behind, but they moved with purpose and efficiency that spoke of advanced technology. "They are beginning the harvest process," Ko reported. "Energy beams are targeting the major cities." Lee watched the tactical display as the beams touched the planet's surface. She knew that millions of people were dying, being converted into raw materials for the enemy's mysterious construction project, but she could not act yet. "Wait for the signal," she reminded her crew. The enemy ships worked methodically, just as they had at every other harvest site. They showed no signs of caution or concern. Why should they? In their experience, Organic species never fought back effectively. Then Admiral Ryu's voice came over the secured communication channel. All units execute Operation Retribution. 31 human warships powered up simultaneously. Weapons that had been dormant for thousands of years came online. Ships that had been converted from peaceful exploration vessels revealed their new deadly purpose. The enemy had never faced a coordinated surprise attack. They had never encountered an enemy that struck back with calculated precision. Their formation broke apart in confusion as human missiles found their targets. Direct hit on the lead vessel, Ko reported with excitement in his voice. Their shields are down. All weapons continuous fire, Lee ordered. Do not give them time to adapt. The battle lasted only 18 minutes. When it was over, 11 of the 12 enemy ships were destroyed or disabled. The 12th managed to escape, but not before human boarding parties had captured valuable technology and data. Most importantly, the harvest of Kepler 452 had been stopped. For the first time, the enemy had been defeated. News of the victory spread across human space within hours. After weeks of fear and helplessness, humanity had finally struck back. The celebrations were subdued. Too many people had already died, but there was hope again. Admiral Ryu studied the reports from the battle. Excellent work, Captain Lee. What did you learn about enemy capabilities? They are powerful but inflexible, Lee reported. Their ships are designed for harvesting, not combat. They could not adapt quickly when we changed the rules. And the captured technology? Dr. Yang's team is analyzing it now. But Admiral, they will be ready for us next time. This surprise will not work twice. I know, Admiral Ryu replied, but now we know they can be beaten, and we have 6 more weeks to prepare before they bring reinforcements. 6 weeks to turn humanity's awakening war machine into something that could fight a sustained conflict. 6 weeks to prepare for the real war that was coming. The enemy had made their second mistake. Their first had been attacking humanity at all. Their second was letting one of their ships escape to report that the harvest had failed. Now they would come in force, expecting serious resistance. But they still did not understand what they were facing. They were about to learn what happened when humanity truly went to war. The enemy response came faster than anyone expected. 6 days after the victory at Kepler 452, Admiral Song's deep space sensors detected massive movement in the outer galaxy. Hundreds of ships were converging on human space. They are bringing everything they have, reported Commander Kim Jae-won from the sensor station. Initial count shows over 300 vessels. Fleet Admiral Ryu Dongmin studied the tactical displays in the New Seoul Command Center. The enemy fleet was larger than the entire human space force, even after 6 weeks of frantic military expansion. Estimated time of arrival? 4 days, Admiral. They are moving at maximum speed toward the core worlds. Admiral Ryu nodded grimly. The enemy had learned from their defeat. Instead of harvesting isolated colonies, they were striking directly at humanity's heart. If they could destroy the major population centers, human resistance would collapse. Signal all fleet commanders. We implement Defense Pattern Omega. Defense Pattern Omega was the most desperate strategy in the Prometheus archives. Instead of meeting the enemy in open space, human forces would use guerrilla tactics. Hidden run attacks, ambushes. Anything to slow down the enemy advance while the civilian population evacuated. Captain Lee Soo-jin received her orders aboard the Retribution. Her task force would harass the enemy fleets forward, scouts while the main human force prepared for the final battle at New Seoul. It sounds like a suicide mission, observed Lieutenant Ko Jin-soo as he reviewed the tactical plans. All our missions are suicide missions now, Lee replied calmly. The only question is how many of them we take with us. But something had changed in the weeks since the Prometheus protocols were activated. The humans who had once been peaceful explorers and diplomats were becoming something else. War was awakening instincts that had been dormant for 3,000 years. Master Sergeant Pak Min-ho led the first human ground assault in millennia. The target was an enemy processing station that had been built on the ruins of Haven Colony. Intelligence suggested it was a key node in their construction network. Remember, he told his squad as their transport approached the landing zone. These things process living beings like raw materials. Show them the same mercy they showed our people. The attack began before dawn. Human soldiers moved through the geometric landscape like ghosts, using terrain features the enemy had never bothered to hide. Their flexible tactics confused the Reapers, who expected organic beings to move in predictable patterns. First objective secured, Pack reported, as his team destroyed a crystalline processing facility. No enemy casualties because there is nobody home. These installations are automated. That discovery was important. The enemy relied heavily on machines and artificial intelligence. They had few actual soldiers because they had never needed them. Their victims had always been defenseless. Push forward to the central spire, Pack ordered. If we can disable their network node, it might disrupt operations across the entire sector. The assault succeeded beyond all expectations. The central spire contained the quantum communication array that coordinated enemy activities across dozens of star systems. When human explosives destroyed it, processing operations stopped throughout the region. But the real breakthrough came from Dr. Han Ye-jin's research team. They had been analyzing the technology captured during the Kepler 452 battle. "I have found their weakness," she announced during an emergency briefing. "Their entire civilization is based on quantum entanglement networks. They share information instantly across vast distances." "That sounds like an advantage," observed General Bae-soon Young. "It is until someone figures out how to disrupt the network. I have developed a weapon that can sever their quantum connections. Without their network, they become isolated and confused." Admiral Ryu looked at the weapon specifications. It was essentially a quantum virus that would spread through enemy communication systems. "How effective is it?" "In laboratory tests, it completely disrupted all enemy equipment we have captured." "But Admiral, I can only make a few of these devices. We would need to get them very close to major enemy installations." "How close?" "Direct contact. Someone would need to physically place the devices on enemy ships or facilities." Another suicide mission. But Admiral Ryu was beginning to understand something important about the new humanity. They were not the same species that had signed the Great Accord 3,000 years ago. War had awakened something primal and dangerous. "I volunteer," said Captain Lee when she heard about the mission requirements. "As do I," added Master Sergeant Pack. "And my entire engineering team," offered Commander Shin Echa. Within hours, Admiral Ryu had more volunteers than he could use. Humans who had never seen combat were volunteering for missions that had almost no chance of survival. "Why are they so willing to die?" asked Dr. No Yunseo, the historian who had discovered the Prometheus protocols. "Because they are not really dying," Admiral Ryu replied. "They are becoming what humanity was always meant to be. Not peaceful explorers who avoid conflict, not diplomats who solve everyone else's problems, but the species that will do whatever it takes to protect what they love." The final battle began when the enemy fleet reached the outer planets of the Sol system. 300 alien vessels faced 200 human ships, but the numbers did not tell the whole story. Captain Lee led the first wave of attacks. Her task force of converted civilian ships moved like a pack of wolves, targeting enemy vessels that had been separated from the main fleet. "Remember," she broadcast to her pilots, "we are not trying to win a fair fight. We are trying to make them pay so much for every victory that they decide we are not worth harvesting." But something unexpected happened during the first engagement. The enemy ships, which had seemed so powerful during their harvest operations, could not adapt to human tactical flexibility. When Lee's fighters attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, the enemy formation became confused. When human ships used the gravity wells of planets to slingshot into unexpected attack positions, the enemy could not respond effectively. "They fight like machines," reported Lieutenant Ko after the first successful engagement. "Logical and efficient, but not creative." "Then we will be as illogical and inefficient as possible," Lee replied with grim humor. The space battle raged for 3 days. Human losses were heavy, but enemy losses were catastrophic. Ships designed for harvesting defenseless civilizations were not built to fight a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. On the second day, Master Sergeant Pack's ground team successfully planted Dr. Han's quantum disruption devices on 3 major enemy vessels. The effect was immediate and devastating. "Enemy fleet coordination is breaking down," reported Commander Kim from the sensor station. "They are losing cohesion. All units, press the attack," ordered Admiral Ryu. "Do not give them time to adapt." But the most important moment came when the enemy flagship, a massive crystalline vessel 3 times larger than anything in the human fleet, attempted to retreat. Captain Lee's ship was the closest human vessel. The Retribution was damaged and low on ammunition, but she ordered pursuit anyway. "Captain," protested Lieutenant Ko, "we cannot match their speed." "We do not need to match it," Lee replied. "We just need to get close enough." The Retribution's final missile salvo crippled the enemy flagship's engines. The massive vessel, which had probably supervised the harvest of countless species, drifted helplessly as human boarding parties prepared to capture it. "This is for Haven Colony," Lee whispered as she watched the boarding shuttles dock with the enemy ship. The war ended not with a grand battle, but with a simple choice. The surviving enemy vessels, cut off from their quantum network and facing annihilation, simply powered down their weapons and stopped fighting. They had never encountered resistance like this. In millions of years of harvesting, no species had ever fought back effectively. They had no protocols for dealing with defeat. Humanity had remembered what it meant to be human, not just won a war. They had broken an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. Status report: Admiral Ryu requested as the last enemy ship surrendered. Total enemy losses: 273 vessels destroyed or captured. Human losses: 89 ships, 43,000 personnel. The numbers were sobering. 43,000 humans had died in the space battle. Thousands more had been killed during the harvest attacks. But humanity had survived, more than survived. They had proven that the galaxy's greatest predators were not unstoppable. "What do we do with the prisoners?" asked General Bay. Admiral Ryu looked out at the debris field where the greatest space battle in 3,000 years had just concluded. "We try to understand them, and we make sure they never threaten anyone again." The long peace was over, but a new kind of peace was about to begin. A peace guaranteed not by treaties and good intentions, but by the proven ability to defend what mattered most: humanity. Hey. 6 months after the final battle, Captain Lee Soo-jin stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above New Seoul. The view showed a galaxy forever changed. Human warships patrolled trade routes that had once been protected only by treaties and good intentions. "Still getting used to the new reality?" asked Admiral Ryu Dong-min as he joined her at the viewing window. "Sometimes I miss the old days," Lee admitted, "when our biggest worry was a broken communication array or a disagreement between colonies." "The old days were an illusion," Admiral Ryu replied gently. "We lived in peace because nothing truly dangerous had found us yet." Below them, the interrogation centers held the surviving Reapers. Dr. Lim Tae-sung had been working for months to establish meaningful communication with the captured aliens. What he learned had shocked even the battle-hardened military commanders. "They are not evil," he reported during the weekly briefings. "They simply do not understand that other species are truly alive." Chancellor Kim Dae-ho looked puzzled. "How is that possible?" "Their consciousness is completely different from ours. They see the universe as divided between the eternal machine, which is them, and temporary organic matter, which is everything else. To them, using organic beings as construction materials is no different from using metal or stone." "But they must know we are intelligent," protested General Bae Soon-young. "Intelligence, yes, but not life as they understand it. We are temporary patterns in organic matter. Interesting patterns, but still just temporary arrangements of atoms that will eventually decay." Dr. Han Ye-jin had been studying the captured Reaper technology. Her discoveries were equally disturbing. "They have been doing this for approximately 12 million years. We have found evidence of at least 40,000 harvested species." 40,000, whispered Dr. No Yun-seo. "Entire civilizations lost forever." "Not lost," corrected Dr. Han, "converted. Every harvested species becomes part of their great construction project. We think they are trying to build something that will last forever, a monument to eternal existence." The scope of the Reaper crimes was beyond human comprehension. But what troubled the human leadership more was a different question. What should they do now? "We could destroy them completely," suggested Admiral Song Hyun-woo during one strategy meeting. "Execute the survivors and make sure this never happens again." "That would make us no better than them," argued Dr. Yoon Ji-ho, who had been promoted to head of xenological ethics. "Would it?" challenged Master Sergeant Pak Min-ho, now a colonel. "They killed 43 million humans and billions of other beings across history." Chancellor Kim studied the report spread across his desk. Casualty figures, resource assessments, recommendations from dozens of experts. The weight of decision was enormous. "What do the other species want us to do?" he asked. "They want us to execute the Reapers," replied Foreign Minister Lee So-young. "The Altarians lost 2 colonies to them centuries ago. The Zephyrians have ancient legends about the geometric destroyers. Every species in the galaxy has suffered because of them. And if we refuse, they will accept our decision. After watching us defeat the Reapers, nobody questions human authority in military matters anymore." That was the new reality. Humanity had not sought galactic leadership, but they had earned it through victory in the greatest war in galactic history. The other species looked to them for protection and guidance. Captain Lee had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Frontier Defense Force. Her job was to patrol the galaxy's edges, watching for threats that might emerge from the unexplored regions beyond known space. "Do you think there are others out there like the Reapers?" she asked Admiral Ryu during one of their regular consultations. "Almost certainly. The galaxy is vast and old. We have explored only a small portion of it. Then we need to be ready." "We are ready, Sujin. The question is whether we want to stay ready." It was the great debate of the post-war period. Humanity could return to its peaceful ways, trusting that the Reaper threat had been unique, or they could remain militarized, prepared for whatever dangers might emerge from the cosmic dark. The decision was made during a referendum held across all human colonies. The question was simple: should humanity maintain its military capabilities permanently, or return to the peaceful state that had existed before the war? The vote was not close. 87% of humans chose to remain armed and vigilant. "We learned something important," explained voting advocate Dr. Kim Hae-won. "Peace is not the absence of weapons. Peace is having weapons and choosing not to use them unless absolutely necessary." The new galactic order reflected this philosophy. Humanity became the galaxy's guardian species, maintaining the largest military force but using it only to protect others. The Great Accord was rewritten to acknowledge this reality. "We, the species of the galaxy, recognize that true peace requires strength," read the new treaty's preamble. "We designate humanity as the guardian of galactic security, trusting in their wisdom to use force only when necessary to protect innocent life." But the greatest challenge was not military or political. It was psychological. How could a species that had just fought the most brutal war in galactic history return to normal life? Dr. Yoon Ji-ho established counseling centers throughout human space. Veterans like Colonel Pak struggled with returning to civilian life after experiencing combat. Civilians who had lived through the Harvest attack suffered from nightmares and anxiety. "We are not the same people we were before the war," he explained to a gathering of mental health professionals. "We cannot pretend that nothing has changed." "What have we become?" asked Dr. No during one therapy session. "We have become who we always were," Dr. Yoon replied. "The peaceful years did not change our fundamental nature. They just taught us to control it." 5 years after the war ended, Captain Park Woobin took his daughter to visit the memorial on Haven Colony. The planet had been restored, its geometric patterns replaced with new cities and farms. But at the center of the main settlement stood a crystalline monument, not unlike those the Reapers had left behind. This one carried a different message, carved in every language spoken in the galaxy. "Here died 12 million souls who never knew they were soldiers in a war they did not start. They are remembered. They are avenged. They will not be forgotten." "Why do we have a monument like the bad aliens made, Papa?" asked his 6-year-old daughter Minju. "Because we want to remember what happened here," Park explained. "And we want everyone who sees it to understand that humanity will never let this happen again." "Are we the strongest species now?" Park considered the question carefully. Around them, children played in parks that had been built over Reaper processing facilities. Families enjoyed picnics on ground that had once been geometric patterns of destruction. "We are strong enough to protect what we love," he said finally, "and that is all the strength we need." Admiral Lee Soo-jin, now in command of the Galactic Defense Force, received reports from across known space. Human ships patrolled trade routes. Human bases guarded strategic systems. Human diplomats worked to resolve conflicts before they required military intervention. "Any signs of new threats?" asked her aide, Commander Ko Jin-soo. "Always," Lee replied, studying the displays that showed human forces spread across the galaxy. "But now we are watching for them." The long peace had lasted 3,000 years and had been broken by an enemy that saw humanity as nothing more than raw materials. That enemy had been utterly destroyed, but the lesson remained. Peace was not a natural state of the universe. Peace was something that had to be protected and defended by those willing to fight for it. Humanity had learned that lesson well. They had paid for it with the blood of 43,000 soldiers and 43 million civilians. But they had learned it completely. The galaxy was at peace again, but it was a different kind of peace. A peace guaranteed by the knowledge that somewhere among the stars, human ships stood ready to defend the innocent against any threat that might emerge from the cosmic darkness. The Reapers had made one final mistake. They had assumed that a peaceful species would remain peaceful when faced with extinction. They had learned, too late, that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their tactics or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to surrender. When fighting for something they believed in, the peace would last as long as humanity remembered that lesson, and humanity would remember forever